And, of course, the other night, we were sitting back watching the Dallas Wings game, and yes, no doubt, it was once again one of the worst officiated games you will ever see in your entire life.
Paige Bueckers gets the whistles, Indiana takes a tough 1-point loss, and the internet explodes. Fans are screaming about referee bias. Sophie Cunningham's throwing gas on the fire, and then Kelsey Mitchell steps in, and she's not here to feed the drama. She's here to shut it down, call out the real problem, and send a message to critics who think this Fever team can't win without Caitlin Clark. Let's break it down.
We have the Chicago Sky on the horizon. Right around the corner, the Chicago Sky are coming to town. And who can we rely on to continuously pick us up when we are feeling down?
This was supposed to be the next chapter in the Caitlin Clark versus Paige Bueckers rivalry. The hype was there, the fans were ready, but Clark was still sidelined with that stubborn right groin injury. Instead, it turned into Paige Bueckers' night. 16 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds, and a massive boost from Maddie Siegrist, fresh off an injury herself, with 22 points. Indiana came into the game 3-0 against Dallas this season, even without Clark. But from the jump, things felt different. Dallas hit early shots, controlled the tempo, and Indiana was chasing the game instead of dictating it. Every time the Fever looked ready to make a run, the Wings had an answer. Then came the whistles. Lots of them, and not in Indiana's favor. By the time the final horn sounded, it was 77-76 Dallas. 1 point, 1 possession, and a whole lot of frustration boiling over in the Fever locker room. That's when the conversation went from basketball to officiating. Head coach Stephanie White, usually measured in her post-game comments, hinted that the officiating didn't feel balanced. Sophie Cunningham, she went all in. On her Show Me Something podcast, she flat out said, "Paige is a great player, but last night the refs gave her all the damn whistles." That comment lit social media on fire. Bueckers fans fired back, claiming she earned every call. Fever fans rallied behind Cunningham, pointing to what they saw as clear examples of ticky-tack fouls in Paige's favor. Neutral fans? They were just happy to watch the chaos unfold. But in all the noise, the conversation shifted away from the real basketball story, and that's where Kelsey Mitchell stepped in.
We have the Chicago Sky on the horizon. Right around the corner, the Chicago Sky are coming to town. And who can we rely on to continuously pick us up when we are feeling down?
She wasn't about to let the loss be pinned solely on officiating. She had a very different take, and it put the spotlight right back where it belonged. When the dust settled after that 1-point loss to Dallas, the conversation everywhere was about the refs, whether Paige Bueckers got too many calls, whether the Fever were on the wrong side of a double standard. Sophie Cunningham had already lit that fire with her podcast comments. But then, in steps Kelsey Mitchell, and she goes in a completely different direction. After practice, she was asked about the officiating noise and didn't even flinch. She wasn't biting. Instead, she hit the team right between the eyes with some truth. "We took hits early and couldn't recover. You can't let players of that caliber get into rhythm." That's not a generic post-game cliche. That's a statement loaded with meaning. Because if you go back and rewatch that game, you'll see exactly what she's talking about. Paige Bueckers got into rhythm almost immediately. She curled off screens and found open looks in the mid-range. No hand in her face, no body bump to throw off her timing. Maddie Siegrist? Same story. She stepped onto the court after missing games and looked like she'd been practicing on Indiana's defense for weeks. Clean touches at her favorite spots, free drives down the lane, zero disruption. What Mitchell was really saying is that Indiana didn't set the tone defensively. Against elite scorers, you have to make them uncomfortable early, force them into bad shots, disrupt their movement, deny them clean entry passes. Instead, the Fever played catch-up from the opening minutes. And once scorers like Bueckers and Siegrist see that first couple of shots go in, the basket starts looking like a swimming pool. Mitchell's decision to focus on execution instead of officiating also sends a bigger message to her teammates, to her coach, and to the fan base. She's saying, we're not going to give ourselves an out. We're not going to point fingers at the refs and pretend that's why we lost. That's leadership. And it's why Mitchell is the voice in the locker room that can keep this team steady while Caitlin Clark is out.
That might be Money Mitch. I just want to let you guys know that. Sophie Cunningham, her hot streak since the All-Star break, averaging over 12 points per game, 2.7 threes made per game, splits of 58, 53, and 89%. Sophie Cunningham, since the All-Star break, has nearly been a screw 50-40-90, 50-50-90.
Here's where Mitchell's comments hit an even deeper nerve. This wasn't just about one game. Indiana's defense has been a season-long problem, and the numbers back it up in a big way. Offensively, no issues. They're putting up 84.5 points per game. They've got a 105.2 offensive rating, and they can get buckets from multiple players even without Clark. But defensively, it's a different story, and everyone in the league can see it. Let's start with the most glaring stat. It's been 16 games in a row since Indiana held an opponent under 70 points. That means month after month of letting teams play in their comfort zone. And when you zoom in on the paint, it gets worse. The Fever are giving up 37.7 points per game inside. That's bottom tier in the WNBA. Why is that so damaging? Because in the playoffs, games slow down. Half-court offense becomes the norm, and teams that can score at the rim without relying on transition are almost impossible to beat. Right now, Indiana is letting opponents get there way too easily. The Dallas game was a perfect example. When they weren't hitting jumpers, they were slicing through the Fever defense with cuts, drives, and high-low passes. Boston and Howard were left in 2-on-1 situations far too often. Rotations from the weak side came late, and help defenders didn't bring enough force to actually alter shots. It's not just a personnel thing, it's about defensive discipline. It's about communication, closing off the baseline, and not getting sucked too far into help so shooters don't have wide-open looks. The Fever have the athleticism to be a much better defensive team, but the habits aren't consistent yet. And until they fix that, every team in the league is going to look at the paint as a green light. And now comes the real test. The Fever have to fix these defensive issues immediately because next up is the Washington Mystics. And they've got two rookies in Kiki Iriafen and Sonia Citron, who are tailor-made to expose Indiana's exact weaknesses. Iriafen is a relentless interior scorer. She'll post up deep, fight for every rebound, and force defenders to foul or give up layups. Citron is sneaky. She moves without the ball, cuts into open space, and can finish through contact. If Indiana leaves the paint open like they did against Dallas, these two could put up career nights. This game is bigger than the standings. It's about sending a message not just to the critics, but to themselves, that they can lock in defensively without needing Caitlin Clark to bail them out on the other end. Kelsey Mitchell's stance after the Dallas loss, no excuses, no distractions, is exactly the mentality they need going into this matchup. If they win, and they win because they played defense, it changes the narrative. It shows they can grind out games, they can get stops, and they can handle playoff-level intensity without their superstar. Then, when Clark comes back, they'll be a complete team. One that doesn't have to outscore opponents in shootouts, but can suffocate them in crunch time. The truth is, the Fever's playoff hopes don't just hinge on Clark's return. They hinge on whether the rest of the roster can tighten the screws defensively right now. And Washington is the perfect chance to prove it. If they show up flat, the critics will be louder than ever. But if they bring the kind of fight Mitchell is demanding, it could be the turning point of their season.
After having a bad day and a tough loss against the Indiana Fever, man. And then also Enrique forced to go private after catching a lot of vitriol about her game yesterday. We are about to get all the way into it.